Crossfader, the methodologies and the techniques for the transition. Before one can master the techniques, one must accept that the technique, the methods, the manifestations, the intentions, the altar building, the rituals and the work are custom to the user. In order for you to understand your meditation, your intentions, your affirmations, your mantras, whatever you want to use, is custom to the user. See, a lot of times we try to use the seamless transitions by using the external points to set the tone for the internal. But you gotta understand it's the internal that creates the external. There is no smooth the transition is smooth as long as you're applying what you learned. I'm gonna say it one more time. The transition can be real smooth if you're truly being honest to what you're applying. Yeah. Oh yeah. Welcome to the God Hour. Let's get into this. Grand Rise, gods and goddesses, kings, queens, occultists, alchemists, brujas, initiates, adepts, shamans, shamanesses, whatever you are, understand today is the only day that matters. Remember that you are the only one that matters. Because everything outside of us is a reflection either for the experience or the observation. In order to get to that state of observation, we gotta master those experiences. Welcome to the God Hour Podcast. I'm your host and your master of ceremonies, your favorite occult psychologist, Papa Lucifer. And this week, we're gonna be getting into that crossfader. You know, after I give you that weekly reading, we break down this session into those threes. We know we love to build in those threes. First section, we're gonna get to that faith feel. Laying the background to the shadow. The root to most of our traumatic responses is always in between two extremes. Emotional numbness versus emotional manipulation. Then we gon' smooth it out and we'll get into that double. The sampling or creating of the reaction patterns. Every relationship seems to be the same because you aren't learning the patterns to assess the mental condition. And then we'll get into that studio healing. Stay tuned for that part. But before we get into that, you know I'm gonna give you that reading. And then we gonna build. Again, welcome to the God Hour Podcast. Oh yeah. It's time to be fucking great. Ashe. Let's get into this weekly reading, shall we? Get the card shuffled up real quick. Hold the card. Alright. Alright, one more get hit with the flip. And then we I'm gonna pull 6. I feel like pulling 6 today. Alright. First card we pulled off the top was the 9 of Wands. Represents the end of the cycle of a lot of decisions. The second cup, or the second card, is the 10 of Cups. The third cup, I keep saying cups, talking about that filling and refilling. The third card is the Ace of Wands. Fourth card is Fortitude or Strength. The fifth card is the 9 of Pentacles. And the sixth card is the Ace of Swords. Let's start with this reading, shall we? The 9 of Wands. It represents the strength. It represents the strength in the decision. So at this point in time, it's time for you to look at the decisions that you are making and understand that your decisions that you are making are to end cycles. The decisions that you are making are to end cycles. That's what's illustrated in the 10 of Cups. You have perfected, and remember, perfected means you have learned, or you're learning to bring balance to your life. You're learning to bring that balance to yourself now. You're learning to bring that balance to yourself now. The decisions that you are making are learning to bring balance to yourself. It's bringing balance to your energy. It's bringing the protection to your energy. It's one thing to protect your energy. It's one thing to make the decision. But if I'm not assessing and taking the moments of reflection in between my decisions, then all I'll do is keep trying to fill up all those other cups. Let's talk about those cups. The cup of these cups that you keep trying to fill up to maintain the behavior, maintain the emotional catalyst, maintain the whole thought process. As I'm always saying, the reflections that you see outside of you are bringing you to points of where you were with yourself. Everything outside of you that's happening is bringing you to it always brings you to the points of yourself. That's usually what's always being triggered. The Ace of Wands represents it's time to allow yourself to sit in the root of where you once came. A lot of times when we're going through this process, especially when we're going into our internal work, we don't tend to look at when the trigger comes up and when it makes us remember something, it brings up a memory, it brings up that aspect, it brings up that shadow from the past. It's bringing up the access point to show us what we did at that point in time to show strength. A lot of times when we're looking at ourselves from this external aspect, we're making decisions based off of the old pattern of where we learned to survive. Now you're in a space where that strength, that fortitude, is the ability to walk away. The ability to, the same way that you built up to that point. Remember, we get stuck in the memory. It's time to embrace that lesson. What did you learn at that point in time? What did you learn what was most important? You always go back to a point. Remember, I'm always talking about in the darkness, your integrity, your humility, your potential, your purpose, and your perspective is given to you. That's where your perspective is shown. We talked about that in the lecture. That's where everything is shown. In the light is what is trying to be preserved. In the light, that's what's trying to be preserved. That's what's trying to be, that's what the projection's coming from. And that's where that perception is at. And that's where we're getting into that 9 of Pentacles. The 9 of Pentacles represents those aspects of now you're looking at yourself, the decisions that you're making. You have to look at what is worthy of being preserved. It's not based on the projection. It's not based on the old perception. The perception of you being safe, the perception of comfort. In order for you to step into your potential, you got to step out of, we know, or we should understand that we got to step out of that comfort zone. That's what we look at when we see that Ace of Swords. The Ace of Swords represents the opportunity to cut that new path, cut and clear out that new path. But remember that two-edged sword cuts away the old aspects. It cuts away the old identity. It cuts away what fed the old identity. It cuts away what fed those projections. It cuts away what fed those preservations. You wanted to be preserved as that identity that from that moment in time where you felt your weakest. Because at that point in time, you felt weakness was a strength. Weakness was the worst thing that can happen. But you got to understand, weakness is your strength. Weakness promotes vulnerability. Whenever you show weakness to yourself, it promotes the vulnerability to strengthen your boundaries, to check your standards. You got to check your standards. That's what this decision process is now. You're at the end of a cycle, and now you're sitting in a space where you got some decisions to make. Which way are you about to go? What are you about to do? It's time to assess those cups. Some of those cups have been perfected. I mean, you can't fill them anymore. It could be that friendship. You can't fill that friendship. You cannot fill that space with any more information without being detrimental to your own emotional health. That job, that relationship, that the standard and the status that you're in right now, you're at a point where you can no longer fill those cups without it being detrimental to your emotional health, your emotional maturity. Setting that new standard. The Ace of Wands represents standing firm in your decision. That Ace of Wands represents standing firm as you allow yourself to burn away what no longer serves purpose as you assess your shadow, as you assess the roots of those situations. I'm going to give you a hint. I'm going to give you this key to your strength. The key to your strength is not what brings you comfort when you're getting to the root of your problems. Any issue that you have, you will not find, when you get to a point where you feel comfortable, so when you're assessing your roots, when you get to a place of comfort, and what I mean by comfort is you can still react to it, you still can maintain the identity, you still can maintain those behaviors, you still can remain avoidance, you still can remain a projection, you still can maintain deflection. It's time to go deeper. See, a lot of times we go into this space, we judge our strength based on our ability to deflect, to keep ourselves protected. We look at the ability to avoid, to keep ourselves protected. We look at the ability to neglect, to keep ourselves protected, to keep us within that emotional aspect. The Nine of Pentacles is telling you it's time to review those roots. It's time to review those roots. A lot of those roots, not a little bit, not some of them, all of those roots. Not just the roots that made you feel bad, or not just the roots that you can assess and then you can get some stuff from it. All of the roots. It's time to assess your roots. It's time to take that assessment. It's time to take that moment of reflection. It's time to start applying to grow. I always ask this question to my clients. I always put it out there. Are you raising to exist? Are you growing to shift? See, when you're raising to exist, everything that pops up that can keep you in comfort will go towards. And when we're talking about that comfort, once again, when we talk about comfort, you're coming from the space of anything you can react to because you know exactly how to react to it. You know exactly how to react to it. That one friendship, you know how to react to it. That relationship, you know how to react to it. That job, you know how to react to it. That's why you stay there. That's what comfort is. Comfort is the ability to react. It's time for you to learn how to respond. It's time for you to learn how to respond. But this has been your weekly clarity. If you wish for some more clarity, get it more in depth, stay tuned to the Plug Talk, and we'll get you plugged in. Welcome to another episode of the God Hour Podcast. You know, I'm your host, your favorite occult psychologist, Papa Lucifer. You know, this week, I wanted to get into the crossfader, the crossfade, the crossing between our healing and not healing. Keep putting out more of these examples. We got to make these conversations normal. And this week ain't no different. We're going to start off with that fade to fill. The root to most of our traumatic experiences is playing to the background of the shadow. This is where we come into the first aspects of our work. Remember, we were getting into this last couple of weeks. When you acknowledge the wound and you work instead of allowing ourselves to assess the wound and heal the wound, a lot of times we like to stay within the traumatic response of two extremes, either emotional numbness or emotional manipulation. Remember, the key to your healing, the key to you getting to the authentic self, the true self, tapping into your power and all that good shit, is to admit where you became emotionally numb and the reflections of emotional manipulation. I remember being emotionally numb. I remember the points where I was truly emotionally numb. Like, I didn't feel the emotion, which with emotional numbness, we say we don't feel it's like we say we don't feel the emotion. It's rather not allowing ourselves to assess through emotion or look through the aspects of the emotion. That's what the emotional numbness is. While staying in that state of emotional numbness, we depend on emotional manipulation. We depend on the emotions of others. And to be honest, in most trauma bonds, in most trauma responses, when we get to it's like when we're getting to that point of assessing the shadow and we don't want to accept that fault. It's not about accepting the fault. It's not about this, and we're going to get deeper into that on Friday. It's not about this trying to find an annulment for the trauma never happening. A lot of times when we're going into this space, we'll try to deny the emotional aspects to try to annul that it ever happened, that avoidance, the neglect. This is where neglect and avoidance, this is where the wound is actually festering. Living through that space, only looking at things through the emotional wound, that filter. That's where the emotional numbness comes from. That's when you come into the space of emotional manipulation. It's when you're in a relationship, whatever relationship that you're holding, friendship, relationship, it's whenever you use your tears to get your way. It's whenever you use these states of emotional manipulation to create isolation. The ultimate aspect when we look at the narcissistic complex is to use the survival story to gain access to others' emotion. The only way that you can do this is based on people on a lower emotional maturity level. You're at a low emotional maturity level, so the only way that you're actually to thrive is to keep everybody at an emotional maturity level below yours. So when you look at that aspect, this is where you are kind of faking it. You're basically faking it with your energy. You're faking it in that state. Is where you're trying to, it's similar to, think about the traumatic experience with your mom or your father, family member, your father. and how even with your mother, we talk with your father, and how your father used money, how your father used status, how your father used these aspects. I know in a lot of things that come with not even going into the extreme of the sexual abuse, but we got to understand sexual abuse is not simply based on the physical aspect. That's another thing that we're going to get into. You can't just keep thinking that sexual abuse, we got to take it outside of the spectrum of just the physical. Got to take it outside of the spectrum of just the physical. Remember, your energy is sacred off the rip. Every time you exchange your energy, that sacred energy, every time you exchange your energy or your energy is manipulated, especially in this emotional content, in the physical form becomes the molestation or the sexual abuse. But before that, this is what we have to understand in order to break that, because you're going to live through it until you understand the emotional aspect. There were things that always led up to that point. That's like with every aspect of trauma. So when we're thinking about generational curses, past life regression, something led up to that point. There was the energies that led up to that point to bring that into the physical manifestation. The reason I can say this and I can pinpoint this is because when you think about it, the way that it was created is the way that you sustain it. So think about the aspects of a sexual, like when you're thinking about how you use sex to heal. Because sex, I don't care where you're at, a healer, us as healers, us in our spiritual sense, we know in our spirituality, we know in our higher sense, we have a high sexual energy. That means we have a highly spiritual energy, a highly tantric energy, all of these aspects, Kundalini energy, all of these energies coming into that space. We have a high drive where we have a higher regard for our our energy being in that sacred sense, sacred geometry, everything gets to that nature. That's the energy. What you're tapping into down here based in the emotional manipulation, that's just as worse as the event. For a lot of people, you're living through the event of the sexual abuse, the sexual abuse, the mental abuse. That mental abuse is sexual abuse. That emotional abuse is sexual abuse. All of these are catalysts of the sexual abuse. All of these go into that space because think about it like this. I want you to peep this. When you have seen somebody go through sexual abuse, everybody around them is now connected to them based on a different stream of thought based on that abuse. So the mental abuse, emotional abuse, everything that led up to create that point. So now you create this state of emotional numbness where you're not dealing with your emotions. The only thing you can depend on is emotional manipulation. I remember being in a state of emotional manipulation, manipulating emotions. You have to admit that we have to admit these things within ourselves, the things that we have benefited from the trauma. That's the only way that you can deal with the trauma. Whenever I'm breaking down in healing sessions and just in classes, you have to acknowledge that you have been you have manipulated, you have cheated, you have done the results, or you have lived through the effects or done the results of the trauma. So basically all you're doing with this fade and fill mentality is you're fading your emotions away and filling it with a bunch. You're not really emotionally numb. You're simply filling the space with patterns to help you keep reacting. This is what I was talking about earlier in the reading when you had to get to the root. The root of getting to the root is getting beyond the point of reaction. Getting to the root of the root of the issue, the root of the wound, the root of the trauma, the root of the event is getting past the state of reaction. A lot of us get to the state of reaction and now you get to this state of reaction and you're basically in that land. Remember we talked about a couple weeks ago, You're in the land of neutrality. That's where you find the layers. That's where you find everything for your identities. As long as you're stuck in the state of neutrality, you're always going to fade. You're always going to try to fade away certain mental aspects or certain aspects in order to maintain the behavior, to maintain the emotional manipulation. This is what we're talking about with the narcissistic energy. This is what you're talking about when you're talking about toxic energy. It's one thing to always say motherfuckers are toxic, motherfuckers are narcissists, motherfuckers are sucking me dry energy vampires. But as I'm always saying, you have to understand that the only way that can attach to you is based on aspects of you. That's the only way it can attach. The only way any external catalyst can attach to you is because within you are the aspects of that catalyst. That's why whenever you're going through the friendships, you're going through your relationships, use relationships in general. I remember for a point in time, always like with a traumatic response, the roots of the traumatic response is what you always search for, the reaction. So the reaction that from the first fruit of that root is what you're always going to read. That's what you're always attaching to. So you're looking at people that are not taking responsibility for themselves. In order for you to remain, see, I take responsibility for myself. You're looking for people to remain so you can keep taking accountability for yourself. You're not taking any accountability. Because remember, accountability will, if I knew that before what it was to really take accountability, my energy would be, the way that I was protecting my energy would be totally different. You don't protect your energy with avoidance. You don't protect your energy with neglect. You cannot protect your energy with the wound still present. You cannot protect your energy with the wound. I don't care what you do. That's what emotional manipulation is. When you're trying to exist through the wound, that's the root of emotional manipulation. So if you feel neglected or you coming from the wound of neglect in any way, shape, or form, that means you will always keep people around you that are neglecting themselves. And when you get to the people that are closest to you when you're exchanging energy, people that will neglect or do not even neglect, but they lack the ability because they have neglect, they have a corresponding wound. They neglect the ability to, they have elected to avoid applying to learning about emotional maturity. I'll give you an example. I remember being in a relationship back in one of my first relationships. The emotional manipulation was crazy. In that space. The emotional manipulation. The physical aspects were there. Everything was there in that space. I was running away from home. In that sense, I was running away from home, running away from the issues at the home in the home front. And I found myself looking for every reason and shutting down every red flag that I saw when it came to my first fiance. Shut down every red flag. I ignored every red flag. By me ignoring all these red flags, I was stuck in a state to where I was able to be emotionally manipulated. Due to me not having the emotional intelligence, I could be emotionally manipulated. She had a lack of emotional intelligence. Her emotional intelligence was based on avoidant wounds, neglect wounds, avoidance wounds, neglect wounds, acceptance wounds, rejection wounds. So when I went into that space, I tried to feed her rejection through my acceptance. I tried to feed her insecurities through my neglect wounds. You see how you connect these aspects? That's why most of those conversations that you be having, when you start that conversation with that dude that you with, you're asking him, what do I need to do? What do I need to do for you to love me? And he give you a bunch of things that are like filtered on surface level shit to avoid any depth. It's not that they can't. You feel me? It's not that they can't. They just don't. It's not that they won't, rather. It's because they can't. They cannot go beyond a certain point within themselves. This is why I keep telling you. The reflections of everything outside of you, the only way you're going to be able to see, you have to see yourself in it. That means you got to see a depth inside of yourself, past the level of comfort. You got to see past this level of comfort. See, a lot of times we stay in that comfort zone with ourselves. So staying in this space of comfort, staying in this space with our mindset, and then you find yourself always trying to atone for what you're trying to feel. You got that void you're trying to fill. Every time you're in that space, you're trying to fill a void. You're trying to fill a void so you can fade away dealing with the emotion. You're trying to fill that void so you avoid the emotion. You try to fill this void of love. You try to fill this void of love from the traumatic experience from the sexual abuse, and you try to fade away those emotions so you can fill that void, so you fill it with something physical. You're only going to be able to fill it with physical and material aspects. You can't fill it with, and when I'm talking about physical and when we're talking about physical and physical and material aspects, we're talking about the knowledge. We're talking about the information. We're not just talking about money, cars, clothes. We gotta get out of that habit. It's more than just the money, the cars, clothes, and sex. It's the mental shit. That means every relationship that you getting into, you wondering why every relationship's the fucking same. We'll get into that next. But you wondering why all your relationships the same because you just keep taking the worst parts or the lower levels of intellectual property to keep you maintaining that state of reaction. You don't get to the root of the problem because you got to get to the root of the aspect with yourself. So all you keep doing is going in every one of your relationships, repeating the same shit, filling up I need a new friendship. So that friendship is to fade away the emotions of the last friendship, but you never fade them away. You never fade them away. Why? Because you always bring it up. In every space that you bringing it up. My last homegirl, my last homeboy, my last relationship, my last job, my mom did, my dad did, my uncle did, my sister did, my brother did. You're always filling it with the space. You're always filling the space with the equivalent to basically external gossip. Now you're gonna come into this understanding of why you stay in certain spaces that are filled with negativity, but you can't seem to pull the fuck away. You seem to always answer your damn phone when somebody wants to say some negative shit. You always want to answer the phone, even to the people that are around you that are going through things. You'll feel their negative pain. You'll always try to look within yourself. You always try to look within yourself for something to connect to that. That's that fade and that fill. In order to keep you from dealing with your own shit or actually getting the information or learning or assessing that root past that place of comfort, you always look for something to deflect in. So now you got friends. I remember having friends always going through some shit, and I always call myself reaching out and always being there. Always found myself being there. Like, I'm gonna run over here and help this friend out. I'm gonna run over here and help them out. I'm gonna run over here. All I was doing was avoiding myself. I was avoiding myself. It even became more and more prevalent when I was in relationships. Because when I was in a relationship, the relationship or the boat was a place of reflection. So any relationship that meant vulnerability, what meant true vulnerability, I would try to avoid using the emotional manipulation. So I needed things outside of me to help to fuel basically the emotional manipulation. You do it all the time. Think about it. You do the shit unconsciously all the damn time. You'll do that shit unconsciously all the fucking time. Think about your look at your circle. Look at your circle. Look at your circle of friends. Or look at the circle of friends that you once had. Look at your circle of friends or the circle that you once had. Look at them. Look at them. Look at them. Look at them. I guarantee all of them have some type of issue. This is how you're gonna start assessing those internal those trauma bonds, the roots to your trauma bonds. Look at all of them. They all have an issue. They're all avoiding something. They all have neglect. They're all neglecting something. And they all feed what? All y'all feed each other. So you can't talk about, I no longer can say that motherfuckers around me draining me, because the only way that someone can drain me is if they have access or they are of the they're of the composition of what is already present. They're simply a catalyst that is pulling that out of you. That's why you're getting drained. Remember, you're not being drained of your positive energy. You're being drained of your negative energy. You see, you stayed in negative spaces so long that when you start going into spaces that are of positive energy, of the higher aspect, you don't know what to do. That becomes the reflection of you feeling lost. That becomes the reflection of you not knowing how to deal with the rebirth and the death process. That becomes you being triggered every 15 seconds. You outside of your comfort zone. Your comfort zone is that negative space, that cocoon. Your comfort zone is the negative scape. You are used to receiving at a lower frequency the energy that you receive. See how that filled that space? The longer that you filling up that space with that negative, you're thinking that all your problems are going to fade away. The more that you're thinking that you're going to help everybody else and give everybody else that help, you think your shit fading away. But why are you still angry? Why are you still angry? Why are you still upset? Why are you mad? Why are you frustrated? Because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're simply filling your space with distractions. And on last Friday on my YouTube channel, we got deep into the aspects of those distractions. You keep creating this space based on distractions. You got everybody around you got a certain identity. They got a certain level. So now going into that space, now you got to look at yourself like, I remember looking at myself like the separation was real. The separation was real. As I really started it, and this is you remember, you got to get past the level of comfort. I remember when I really started becoming aware. I remember when I started reflecting. I remember when I started my assessments, my acknowledgments, my acceptance. I remember when I started doing those processes. I was avoiding the apology. I was avoiding apologizing to myself. I would avoid apologizing to myself. The reflections of me avoiding apologizing to myself was apologizing to my father, forgiving and apologizing forgiving my pops, forgiving my father, forgiving my mother, forgiving my sisters, forgiving family members, forgiving the people that did me dirty, that did what they did, that were catalysts to what I needed to learn. Until I did that, it just kept repeating itself. Until you get to that true apology, and I'm always going to say this, the only apology is change behavior. The only apology is investing in change behavior. That's the only true apology. That's the only true apology. There is no truer apology than investing in the change behavior. When you start changing your behavior, so before I started apologizing and going through the state of forgiveness, I got to the acceptance phase. So I accepted the wound. So now that I accepted the wound, now I'm in a state of higher, holier than thou identity where I'm calling everybody else out on their shit. Now I'm in the realm of neutrality, so all I can do is judge. So now I'm looking at everybody and I'm judging them. And I'm tricking myself because my ego's keeping me in comfort like I'm doing some shit, even though I'm in this state of fading, the fear of fading away. That's the other half of that fade and fill. The fear of fading away, I keep my space filled with individuals in this false sense of help. This is the savior complex. I've talked about that savior complex before. So now I got everybody around me and I feel the need to trigger everybody. I feel the need to trigger everybody. Guess what state I'm in? I'm in the full state. When you come into that realm of acceptance and you're existing in the emotional wound, all you're doing is manipulation. All you're doing is manipulation. I remember my karmic relationship that taught me about emotional manipulation, where we were in a relationship and the first thing that she said was her ex said that she was petty and she was manipulative. I don't know what she's talking about. And I was like, and I'm looking at her and I'm like, I can't see it. Here's the crazy part. I did see it. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to accept it. The reason I didn't want to accept it because I'll have to see it inside of myself. Because the same way that she used emotional manipulation in the sense of the physical was the same way I used emotional manipulation in the physical. I had the place. She didn't have a place. She was dealing with her emotional outburst and everything. She didn't have that. She didn't have any space to do that in. My space was built off of that. My space was built off proving something to somebody. Avoiding rejection, avoiding acceptance, avoiding insecurity. That's what my space was. That's what my first apartment. That's what that apartment was built off of. That's what my job was. That's what my job was fed from. All of my jobs were fed from that. Remember, everything in your space feeds from where your emotions are at. That's why when you start to do your work and all that shit start falling apart, is because you are exposing the core in reflection to the space that you in. You're exposing the core to the reflection of the space that you are in. Now that space can no longer be filled as that aspect fades away. You see how we transmuted from the fade and fill based on emotional numbness and emotional manipulation into the space of fading away the false sense of identities and the false scapes to learn how to fill the space with the aspects of the truer healing aspect. That's integrating your shadow with your light. But as long as you sitting in that space and you mad, you upset all the time, I'm trying to do this though. You can't do it inside that space. I can't believe they did this and I can't believe they did that. Guess what? They had to do that and do that. They had to do exactly what they did so you can assess the tide. Why did you first become introduced to them? Which one of your traumas or which one of your wounds introduced you to them first? Which wound did you introduce to them first? Okay, you know you introduced the wound to them first. That's how a trauma bond works. That's how a trauma bond works. You give them the root. You expose the root of the trauma. Remember, it's all about owning your story. Yeah, it's all about owning your story. Had to flip the tape over real quick. But yeah, that's the state of you staying in these spaces. And it made me come into the level with ourselves. Like, you got to understand that. Like, you got to understand that you've been doing it. Until then, all you're going to be doing is what we're going to be getting into in this segment, dub over. The sampling or creating of reaction patterns. Every relationship, every job, every friendship, everybody's the same because you're not learning the pattern to assess, but you're trying to sustain that mental conditioning, the state of your mental condition. We've talked about this before when we talked about the aspects of you saying that you still saying that you're oppressed, and you still saying that you're struggling, and you still saying that you're struggling and you're oppressed, as I pop off my gallon of water. When you stay in that constant state with yourself, that's why all that shit keep repeating. I saw a meme earlier today and the shit said, apologize to your mom and dad so you stop dating them, basically. Because that's a lot of times that's what we do. Everything that you have not yet apologized to yourself for. The apology opens up the space for the investment in the change behavior. Until I opened up in the apology and started assessing and actually investing in the changing of my behaviors, the changing of my habits, the changing of my patterns. All I would do is I would get to a point of acceptance, but my acceptance would basically come at a price. I actually had a therapy session on Saturday, and we were talking about letting go of control. You staying in that mental condition gives you a sense of control. Remember, we getting out of this good and bad shit. We talking about positive and negative. Because there's shit that you've done in that mental state that was negative, but it served you a purpose. There was shit you did in that mental state that was positive, but didn't serve you any purpose. It was a positive aspect, but it didn't serve you any purpose. It's all in how you assess it. But if all I'm doing is saying in this relationship this happened, in this relationship this happened, it's like going back and saying in all your relationships everybody cheated on you. Or going back in all your relationships and saying everybody stole from you, or everybody did you dirty, or everybody's betrayed you. At a certain point in time, you got to assess why everybody seems to be able to commit to this. Why everybody's able to commit the same travesty upon you. Why is everybody able to cheat on you? Why is everybody able to do you wrong? Why is everybody able to do something to you and it still keeps happening? At a point in time, you got to accept it to yourself. It ain't about what and here's the crazy part, it's never what they did. All they're doing is the effect is based on the effects or the results of what you haven't dealt with. I remember like sitting there like, yo, everybody lies to me and everybody's stealing from me. But then I'm sitting there, I didn't even understand my conversations that I was having with myself. You never even look at the conversations you have with yourself. Your level of value, the level of trust you have in yourself, the level of, I wasn't overly trusting. I had a fear of rejection. I wasn't overly trusting. I had a fear of abandonment. I wasn't overly trusting. I wasn't overly sensitive. I wasn't overly anything. Because when you're overly something, it spills over into what? Remember, I've said it before, I say it all the time. You're always abundant, you're always prosperous, you're always wealthy, you're always healthy, you're always in the state of natural being. But if I have not assessed the unnatural aspects, which is my emotions out of balance, then what do you think will be created inside of that space? Based on me not assessing my roots, based on me staying in a state of emotional manipulation. Even if I was emotionally manipulating myself, that's ultimately what you're doing. You emotionally manipulate yourself. That's what trying to remain in control is. That's what being a control freak is. That's what having that overly compulsive impulse is. That's what it is. You're trying to remain in control of what comes into your space. Or you're trying to make it come through a certain way. Ignoring the hell out of them red flags. And the red flags have nothing to do, and I'm going to say that shit now. The red flags ain't got shit to do with anything physical. Period. A red flag is not the fact that they cannot make any money or they can't keep a job. That's the trigger of the red flag. That's the trigger of the red flag. The fact that they've never been in a relationship longer than a couple of months. That's the trigger to the red flag. So you gotta get out of those. You gotta get out of the red flags based on physical and material shit. Because a lot of y'all use the material shit as the red flag. Ooh, they can't keep a job. You don't even know why they can't. The reason they coming into your space is to show you what you are. Think about it. I want you to think about it next time. Ladies, fellas, gods, goddesses, kings, queens. I want you to think about it next time you have someone come in your space that can't seem to get their life together. I want you to think about that. They are a reflection of you. I'm going to tell you how they're a reflection of you. You seem to always gravitate towards motherfuckers that aren't doing anything with their life. And the only thing that you can say based on you doing some shit with your life is you have a job. You got a degree. You got a job or a degree. You got a bank account. You got some money. That's the only thing you can say when it comes in regards to you saying that you doing something with your life. You ain't doing shit with your life. Because what happens if you lose? This is what happened during COVID-19 when most of y'all motherfuckers lost your goddamn jobs and had to sit in the house with some of them motherfuckers. Some of y'all had some of the best times ever sitting in the house with the motherfucker that ain't never had a fucking job in their life. You sat there and played video games with them. And then, yeah, you started seeing what you really weren't doing. I've said this shit before. COVID didn't make y'all lazy. Your job cutting your hours didn't make you lazy. Your job overworking you didn't make you lazy. You were already lazy. Your job overworking you didn't make you procrastinate. That nigga calling you every 15 seconds, or shorty calling you every 16 seconds didn't make you avoidant. You were already avoidance. You were already in a state of avoidance. You were already nursing the separation. You were already separate. You were already in a state of neglect. So he didn't neglect you, sis. She didn't neglect you, bruh. They didn't neglect you. They exposed your neglect wound. They didn't reject you. They exposed your rejection wound. Remember, your perspective is found in the dark. Your perception is maintained in the light. Remember, your perception is maintained in the light, and your perspective is changed and found in the darkness. So when they started challenging your perception based on what you kept in your space, based on from that relationship, you learned that a nigga needed to have more money. In that relationship, you found out that shorty needed to be more physically sexually appealing and more sexually advanced and more sexually exclusive. So you just kept adding and copying and pasting until you got to the space where you were at now. Remember, I've told you about unhealed manifestations. You held on to the emotional catalyst that you learned based on that projection. The thing that kept your urges. That's why you'll sit there and say dumbass shit. I mean, that's remember Bobby Hemming was talking about, like, women are like literally stay around, like you'll keep dating the wrong person, in heavy quotes. You'll date the wrong person, and then when your energy's been all used up, you'll go get a recharge from the quote unquote good guy or the good girl. But when you find out you cannot manipulate them the way you manipulated the motherfuckers that were in the negative scape, that's when you go back to that negative shit. Remember, this is about acceptance. I'm not giving you anything from a state so you can further avoid. Gotta bring that shit to the surface. Gotta bring that shit to the surface. Everybody, you in the right position, and everything in your position is playing a part. You so busy reacting to everything. You so busy remaining in that state of reaction with your damn self that you ain't learning anything. You can't possibly learn anything. You sitting there stuck looking at motherfuckers like, but they gotta be this way to me, and they gotta be this way, and they gotta be this way, and they gotta be that way. All right, cool. They can be that way. And some of y'all are trying to replace. Y'all trying to fix them factors. That relationship. This is where it gets deep when we're talking about these dub overs. That relationship the relationship that was broken, or the aspects of the relationship, the first relationships that you experienced that were broken, you're trying to replace with what's in this current state. You're trying to take, since you're existing in the past. Remember, I said this last week. By you existing in the past, your shadow existing in the past, you have not brought it to the present. Everything that you do in your present, based on existence, to maintain the perception, preservation, and for the state of preservation, maintaining the perception, maintaining that projection, will be based in the necessity to feed your shadow. The necessity to feed your shadow. Think about it like this. Do you like the brand BMW and Mercedes? I was watching a video earlier. The brand Mercedes and BMW and Lexus, Acura, all these highline brands for what it is or what it does? That's the question you got to ask yourself about relationships, A lot of us are switched in what it does and not what it is. You got to switch yourself from what it was to what it is, from what it does to what it is. You got to switch that. You got to switch from what it is, from what it does to what it is. A lot of you keep going in relationships based on what it does. So you want the titles based on what it does. That's all the identity seeks for comfort, what it does. So you got this dude over here that's built like a box Chevy, but you keep reliable, and they're exactly what you need in order for you to start the healing process. But you don't want to heal. So you go look at the nigga over here that's built like the BMW, little smaller, little more compact, but it's to invest in it emotionally is a lot higher. I'd rather go get that. And same thing for you fellas. Shorty over here, she a Nissan Altima. But you keep trying to go over there and look at the Range Rover built shorty. You are not emotionally mature enough for that. And this is what we talk about. But I can get me a high paying nigga or a high paying chick or a chick that's gonna pay all my shit. All right, yeah. But you're gonna pay a hell of a lot more in emotional aptitude to get there. That's basically what you keep doing. You keep trading out the relationships because you know exactly how much you can afford. But you're avoiding your credit score. Your credit score fucked up. So you know what you can get as is. So you keep getting as is or trauma bonded relationships, trauma bonded friendships based on as is, based on what they can do. You keep trying to dress yourself up as this high line model of vehicle or this high brand when you're store brand at best. You gotta understand, you gotta accept where the fuck you at. I used to be store brand. When I was stuck in the traumatic aspect, I was store brand. I acted like a store brand. I moved like a store brand. That's when I came into this acceptance. But you try to dress yourself up based on the external aspect or sampling bits and pieces to avoid doing the real work. You will sample bits and pieces to avoid to do the real fucking work. Hot girl summer. Broke nigga summer. You living in a rental land. Excited off of physical shit. Why? What's the why? Because they're used to what it is and not what it does. You're not looking at what it does. You have to accept that you're stuck on what it does in order to step into the space of what is. Because what it does is an obstacle. What it does is an obstacle. It's not an opportunity. What it is the opportunity. See, when we're moving in this state of this copying and pasting or dubbing shit over or sampling, you're looking at what it does, and you're taking from what this does and what that 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 does. And then you'll tell yourself that bullshit ass excuse that as long as they're doing what I need them to do, they can stay in the position that they're in. They never change. You never change. But when they fall from the space of being able to do what they were doing, now you want to replace them. They don't serve the same purpose. Now you in a relationship. So what she does or what he does isn't acceptable to the expectancy or the conditions of your relationship. But the moment that space is over with, you sitting there like, but I don't want that. Because you stuck in what it does and not what it is. That this dubbing over aspect or this sampling aspect is literally you living and existing in the necessity of the shadow. Remember, as long as the wound is present, as long as the shadow has not been assessed, as long as that space has not been learned, you have not applied to it to learn it and bring it to the present, everything you gonna do in this current state, whether you want to accept it or not, is gonna be based in maintaining the necessity of the projection from said shadow. It make you look at every relationship differently. It's gonna make you look at every friendship differently. It's gonna make you look at everything as the experience for what it is and not what it does. This is how you start assessing that identity. You're stuck in that identity for what it does, or you're stuck in that state of that reaction. Remember, you gotta break the bond between good and bad and really understand it's positive and negative. Because what that relationship did, what that person did to you in that relationship, where you're basing it on what they did and not what they were. What did they represent? Why did what they did bother you? Why did what they did and why did it bother you? That's what I was trying to say. Why did it bother you? Why did it bother you? Why did it bother you that every nigga you done been with has cheated on you? Why does it bother you that every woman that you've been with has cheated on you? Why does it bother you? Until you get to the root of that shadow and something you have not dealt with. And when you come to me for the consultation and you ask questions like, why is every nigga a narcissist and why every bitch I get with cheat on me or do me dirty with money? I'm gonna ask you about your mother. I'm gonna ask you about your father. I'm gonna ask you about your grandparents. I'm gonna ask you about who raised you. Why? Because that's the root. I don't give a shit about the projection. I'm trying to get to the root. If you were coming to me to get to the projection, then you would go to a traditional therapist. I'm getting to the root. What was your first experience where you saw infidelity? The way, even if, and this is the part, because you can say, my mom never cheated on my dad and my dad never cheated on my mother. In that space, remember, it's the emotional paraphrase or the emotional catalyst that created that space. Your mom didn't have to cheat on your dad in a physical sense. Your dad didn't have to cheat on your mom in a physical sense. You feel me? But they could have did it in a material sense. Your mom could have robbed your dad during the divorce and he never healed from that. So you were in the space being raised by your dad. You were in the space being raised by your dad based on what your mom did, or vice versa. Your dad could have did some shit to your mom and you were raised in the survival mode of the bitterness of your mom looking at you because you remind her of your father. So your mom forever felt cheated. So your mom used the emotional manipulation complex we talked about in the first session in order to maintain the relationship or the reactions of comfort based on manipulation. And now ever since then, since you were living in that space, unaware of it, you didn't deal with it, it's a part of your shadow that you have not yet identified. That's what you've been doing in your current state. So now you get to look at why it really bothered you, why the niggas cheated on you. Remember, everything is a part of your contract that comes into your space. Everything is meant to make you reflect to your contract. You got to go beyond saying, I'm gonna look at my human design chart. That's a tool to understand your soul contract. You got to go past your zodiac and your natal chart, because those are tools, or the table. That's the table of contents to understanding your soul contract. All lined up, line by line. Remember, you cannot seek annulment and place the faults on your identity. You cannot seek annulment and put the faults on your identity. And you do it unconsciously all the time. You don't know why you got mad. You don't know why you were upset. You don't know why you were in that emotional state that you were in. I don't know who I am when I'm that person. That's the identity you created. What identity did you create out of anger? What identity did you manifest out of sorrow? What identity did you manifest out of insecurity? What identity did you manifest outside of that wound? What identity did you manifest based on the traumatic experience? Remember, you created multiple identities to protect yourself based on the traumatic experience. Since those exist in since your shadows are the anchors to those original identities, all you did was kept creating identities to keep yourself anchored to the shadow, so you didn't have to really deal with the shadow. So now you sitting there mad every time your shadow get triggered. How? Remember, I keep telling you, the negative space that you go to, it feeds your shadow. That's why you can go there so frequently. Your identity or comfort, I have you saying that. Oh, I remember saying that shit over and over and over again. I remember a good period of time with my mother. My mother would call me when my sisters or brothers needed money to take care of their bills. My mom would call me. They would bypass me and go to my mother, because they can emotionally manipulate my mother, because they learned emotional manipulation from my mother. They learned that from my mother. The reason they cannot get to me, because I was stuck in a state of emotional numbness. So the only thing that could get to me was only an aspect of coming from that same stream. That's why you can't get out of certain situations. You just keep repeating shit, because you still stuck within the emotional numbness or the emotional womb. And the only way that can be breached is by that of what fills that wound. What created that wound. You ain't even this is why I'm talking about that rebirth complex. This is when we talk about that studio access, that studio love, that false sense of perception. After this break, we're going to get into that next. And we back. Final segment. Yes. We just got through we opened up with fade and fill. Not assessing the shadow and staying in the state of emotional numbness and emotional manipulation. We've all done it. We got into that dub over, or instead of assessing the pattern to learn, to break the mental condition or the mental constraint, that struggle, that oppression, that wound. And it goes into this state of to remain in that condition, but it gets deeper when we look at the aspects of this last segment, which is called studio love. What is the studio, you may ask? Your home place. Remember, I keep telling you that your space is your opportunity. Your initial space is your opportunity. Where you put your energy is your opportunity to learn yourself. Almost done with the gallon. I had water before this, so it's like this might be like a gallon and a half. But yes, studio love, the sanctuary. When you're doing the work, when you're assessing your negatives, when you're assessing your roots, when you're dealing with your roots, and you're really dealing with them, and you're allowing yourself to deal with them, that means you're sitting with yourself, and this is the main important part. If you do not know how to, or you're unaware of it, it's going to expose your rejection wound. Remember, it always exposes the wound that is present. It will expose your rejection wound. It'll expose your acceptance wound. It will feed in these, it will expose and feed upon these wounds every single time. Remember, the intellectual aspect is to bring you in, keeps you in comfort. You got to take in that information and apply it so it destroys your comfort. That means you're not reading, you're not studying yourself, you're not looking at things based on comfort. This is when we're looking at, when people will look at the example, like you use your zodiac sign. I'm an Aquarius, so I'm supposed to be disassociated and separated from motherfuckers. I'm a Leo, so motherfuckers, I'm supposed to be the light of the party. I'm a Gemini, so y'all know I'm a Cancer, so I'm extra emotional. All you're doing is using your zodiac sign as the point for you to be able to stay within a state of emotional numbness. That means you fading away. You fade you keep your shadow in a faded space, like it's fading away, but it's still present, so you can stay in a state of emotional manipulation. Remember, I always say you have to understand that the first step is acknowledging not only the traumatic experience, but accepting that you benefited from the traumatic experience. You benefited from your mom saying no. You benefited from your dad. You benefited from your uncle. You benefited from what they did. Because if you did not benefit from what they did, if I didn't benefit from what they did, I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be in the current state that you in if you didn't benefit from it. It gives you comfort because remember, comfort is based on reaction. As long as you're able to react to it, you're comfortable. It's when you can't react to it. It's when you can't fire back at it. It's when you can't say something to it that can promote a charge or promote the pattern to keep sustaining or maintain the feeling of that space with that energy. That's when you lost in that's when you lost in the, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I remember being in that state. That state is fucking phenomenally crazy. A state where you can't say anything. A state where you literally cannot say anything. To a point to where you're still trying now, because you go through these states, you go to a state where you can't say anything. So now you lean on the points of what you can stay on. And usually that's mainly in the physical sense. You will lean on the physical and the material world. You will lean on the physical and material world. That sound familiar? When y'all stuck out in that space, wanted to go protest and march and talk about the white man did this and the white man is that, and your mama's still this, you lean on physical shit. As long as you feeding off of it, they can feed off of it. Did you ever think about it that way? Remember, your perspective is acknowledged in the darkness. Your perspective is acknowledged in the darkness. Your potential is acknowledged in the darkness. Your purpose is acknowledged in the darkness. The only thing maintained in the light is the preservation of the identity, the perception of the identity, and the projection of the projection through the wound to the identity. You project and create the perception to preserve the behaviors that maintain that identity. Yeah. And your level of emotional maturity is what keeps that living. That's why you'll have an art. That's why you love to argue. That's why you love to say that you felt disrespected. That's why I love to feel like motherfuckers saying they disrespected me. Even into the sense for me being so disassociated from people, if just like in the same sense, if everybody's disrespecting you and you avoid it by reacting to it, it's in the same sense of everybody saying some shit about me and me not assessing it. It's all in the assessment. I remember people to this day say shit about me, but the difference is I've assessed what they've said. I said it Monday in the Meditate and Elevate. Whether they hated me or they loved me, they came from the same position. They was all based in the same position. Because until I assessed what they hated me for in order for me to avoid why they hated me, I stayed in the space of where they loved me. Comfort. Whenever it came time for me to be, whenever I got tired of people loving me and the love was based on a condition. So when that level of energy was not met, I went to go find somewhere else. I went around the people that hated me, or I went around motherfuckers that I knew would trigger, or I could trigger or emotionally manipulate into saying some shit to me so we can be at odds. I always, as long as you're remaining in the trauma bond, you will always need an antagonist. As long as you're always focused on what it does and not what it is, you will always need an antagonist. That's the baseline underlining figure of need and want. Needs and wants are based on antagonists and protagonists. The polarity of that space. Your desire and value, it doesn't need an antagonist or a protagonist. You become the antagonist. You become the protagonist. You become what we call the anti-hero. You become the anti-germ or the anti-soul or the anti-spark or the all-spark. Go watch Transformers. You become the all-spark. Go watch, what's the other one? What was it? Beast World? Beast Mode? Beast Wars? Beast Wars. When they were talking about trying to look for the all-spark, that's what you become. You become seeked out by all things. The more that you become aware of yourself, you become seeked out by all things. This is why I was talking about when you're in that state of acceptance with your wounds. That means you accept that you got some issues. You accept that you got some problems. You got some things. Most of the times, you're not in aware. You're aware, but you're not self-aware. Remember, there's levels to that shit. I remember when I was very aware. The more aware you are, until you come out of the comfort zone of your awareness and step into the self-awareness, that means you see yourself in that space. You see yourself in that rinky-dink friend. You see yourself in that rinky-dink job. You see yourself. You see what you need. You accept what you needed to see based on your homeboy and his girl keep using it for money and all this shit, and all these girls keep running him ragged. So you always trying to say, I don't know why you keep getting with those chicks, until you accept that you seeing your mother or maternal figure or whatever woman hurts you in that space, or the point when you did that same shit in a past life regression. You're aware, but you'll always use judgment. A judgment is based in bias. The way that you get to notice that is listen. I always tell y'all to listen to your conversations. Listen to your conversations. Listen to your conversations. 90% of your conversations will give you every answer that you need and help you in the state of assessment. Are your conversations based on growth? Or are they based on, remember, there's 3 levels to the conversations. Are your conversations about other people? Are your conversations about events? Or your conversations about solutions? Are your conversations about other people? Are your conversations about events? Or your conversations about solutions? Self-awareness creates solutions. Awareness creates events. So what does the trauma bond create? What does the lack of awareness create? What does the lack of reflection create? You need something. It creates the lower. It creates the aspects of people. It creates the aspects of people. The humanity aspects creates the caring for people. The caring for the events. The caring for the event. The caring for the people. The false sense of creating an access point to the energy. I'm gonna give you an example. I'm gonna give you an example real quick. You ever notice? Because I remember when I first noticed this, and that shit blew my fucking mind that I was even doing it. I didn't realize how emotionally manipulative I was until I really sat in a space and I had a karmic reflection showing it to me. And then just because that karmic reflection showed it to me, to remember, karmic relationships, we got to get out of this cycle. Karmic relationships are not just love interest. The relationship that you in with the person you having sex with in a physical sense, that's one example of a karmic relationship. Remember, you got to take sex or the sacred energy exchange to the highest point. It's a combination of the senses that are building to manifest in healing. But if there is an emotional wound present, that's the breach in the womb. You want to understand the breach in the emotional womb? Go read the Pistis de Sophia. When it gives you the story about your Yodaldabroth and how he pierced the wound. He pierced the womb and he came out blind. You're your Yodaldabroth. Because I'm tired of motherfuckers wanting to say the white man's, you're your Yodaldabroth. You're the only thing that can create down here. So what else would you be? You're your Yodaldabroth. And that goes to the Hotep motherfuckers. And the motherfuckers that want it, that's who you are. That is the breach of your emotion. That is the breach of your emotion. So now you're in the fear base. So everything you create within your space is based in the fear complex. That's why things that are at that frequency, that's why you always hear people like, I can get any man I want. I can get any woman I want. It don't matter what the fuck you can get. It doesn't matter what the fuck you can get, because now you stuck in what it does. It matters what you can learn. That's where you learn in what it is. So me going back to the karmic relationship, which was a friendship, and I'm looking at this friendship and I'm like, no matter what I do, no matter how many times I have these dudes around me, no matter how many times, whether it was chicks, dudes, whoever, no matter who the fuck was around me and how much game, at the end of the day, I'm sitting there arguing like, yo, they were with me at this, or they were here, they watched the same thing I watched. Even when it came to friends and family, sisters and brothers. Because remember, Bobby Hemmett broke that shit down. After the child rearing phase, they're not really related to you. They were only necessary for the rearing phase. Because when you notice it and you're like, well, I'm in this position, but my brother in this position, and my sisters are in this position, and my cousins are in this position, because they're not related, they're only related to you based upon the traumatic bond. You stepped out, you breached out of that womb through whatever traumatic experiences, and you started making your own attachments. This is when you hear the Christian people talk about when the lower aspect of when the man is older, when the man finds his wife or the wife finds their husband, that family becomes their family. They have to leave the old family alone. It's not talking about in a physical sense primarily. It's talking about in the aspects of yourself. Whole book talking about your shadow work. That's why it's called the Sun Book. That's why it's called the Quran. That's why it's called the Torah. That's what these books is meant to be used for. But you, damn Jesus and damn all this shit. Okay. The only reason you can say fuck that is because you're the same, and I've said this before, the same blood of Jesus that covered the sins and all the inequities of whatever happened in the family is the same shit that you using to cover up all your traumatic experiences. So you ain't got to take no responsibility or accountability, or very little accountability and responsibility. Remember, you cannot seek an annulment for what happened. That's when you get into that space of they're not apologizing. So they're not apologizing. They're not accepting. They're not talking about it. So why should I? That's because you're seeking an annulment. You're seeking fault. Remember, your healing work, you're not seeking fault. You're not seeking for a motherfucker to tell you, yeah, I did it. Because even if they say, yeah, I did it, there's going to be a then what? There's going to be a why, regardless. But if I seek for the why based on what they did and not what they are, I'm going to seek it through emotion. I'm going to seek it through the same emotions that I'm supposed to be learning. I'm still avoiding the emotion. I'm still avoiding the emotional wound. I'm still avoiding the neglect wound I have. I'm still avoiding sitting in the wound. I'm still avoiding the accountability of me sitting in that wound. I'm still avoiding the fact that I'm sitting in a space, and because I have neglect wounds and I'm trying to keep those emotions numb. And every time I go into the relationship or the friendship, they can get to a certain point. And this is one thing that I learned. You can't ask for it. You can't ask for love. You can't ask for it. You can't ask for respect. You cannot ask for appreciation. You cannot ask for acceptance. You must create that shit within yourself. That's when you step into the realm of what it is and not what it does. Being stuck in that realm of what it does, it'll have you overly doing shit to try to get them to come with you, to get them to choose you, to get them to come towards you. I remember so hard when it came to the aspects with my sister and her baby father that she's still with. The second one, not the first one, but it's the first one and the second one The second one's just a repeat of the first one. A more devolved sense. I can't even say evolved. It's devolved. Because they still stuck in humanity. But that's neither here nor there. So I remember every time trying to bring them to my space, I was like, yo, but I only can use physical shit. It was a battle of physical shit. It was I only can use physical shit. And in other times I only can use emotional shit. I was battling the physical manifestations of what they saw as in value based on need and want on one end, and I'm using my emotions to feed that space. So as long as I was stuck within the emotional traumas that happened inside of the rearing phase, the longer that space existed, the longer that I kept going over there, the longer that I kept trying to help them. Even when I was getting the tidbits of information of knowledge before I applied it. Remember, there's the acknowledgement, then there's the acceptance, then there's the apology phase. Remember, that phase keeps going. That's your shadow work. That shit keep going. So until I apologize for myself for not knowing, but I'm taking it forward based on what I know because I'm applying, I kept going over there. I kept doing the same shit. I remember telling my sister that, sis, you need to heal. You need to have a conversation about that shit. I remember telling my brother that shit. You need to have a conversation with Pops. Man, he ain't going to accept the admitting he wrong. And the only thing I could say was, yeah, you right. I didn't do the work yet. I didn't apply what I learned. How am I going to tell somebody else to go do something I ain't applying? That's the equivalent to you working a job. Crazy part. It's the equivalent to you having a job. And I remember my mom, every time I had a job, this goes back, this is a reflective moment. I remember every time I had a job, I remember my brother needed a job. I was like, I don't sign up on people that are lazy as shit. I don't. I won't sign up on niggas that are lazy as shit. All my mom kept saying, but it's your brother. I'm not co-signing for somebody that I know is lazy, and I know is lazy, that I know doesn't have a high sense of work ethic, that I know doesn't have these senses or does not have the senses to operate within that realm. But then it made me reflect and look at myself. I was like, if I can still react to said thing or said aspect, some way, shape, or form, in correspondence with inside of me are those same aspects. Somewhere within inside of me are those aspects. Remember, your unseen creates your space. Your unseen creates your space. It creates the studio, it creates the laboratory, and where you do your works. You unconsciously play the role of a chemist inside of your spaces with your own emotions. If I don't understand my emotions, I can falsify and use my emotions. If I don't understand my emotions, then guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna seek things I only can seek based on the level of the emotions that I understand. So if I'm stuck in a space of fear, the fear-based narrative, that means hatred, frustration, sorrow, depression, the lower aspects, guilt, lack, apathy, grief. If I'm stuck in those spaces, if I still feel those things, if I still move in those narratives, then I only can seek and create that of that same space. That's the breach inside of my wound. That's the only thing I can create. I don't care what friendship I would try to go get to and how good it would be in the beginning. They always ended the same exact way. They always had the same exact aspects. I don't care what type of relationships I would try to build, they would always be to that aspect. They would always feed my need to be frustrated. They would always feed my need to stay within the emotional aspect. They would always feed my neglect wound. They would always feed my acceptance and my insecurities. Always. Whether they did it primarily or I created a reason for it to happen. It was always present because it was created of my aspect. I had to break myself out of the space of cheating and accept that I cheated before. I talked about that in the lecture. You got to accept that you cheated before. Remember, negative and positive, not good and bad. There was times that you cheated a system that was perceived negative in the human space, but it served you a purpose. There were times where you swallowed your pride in the sense of morals and it seemed positive, but it didn't serve you any purpose. It didn't give you a necessary result. It's okay, you were learning. There was points in times where I did those things. So in my space, that's when a traditional psychologist talk about there's emotional cheating and there's mental cheating and there's emotional cheating, mental cheating, material cheating, and physical cheating. The levels of infidelity. So now you got to ask yourself, whenever you in a space with yourself, if I'm not open and honest to myself and I'm not learning to assess myself, I'm cheating myself out of learning lessons or applying to move forward. So naturally, if I keep repeating this process, what do you think I would manifest into my space? What do you think you would manifest into your space? The sum of all of your fears? That's why you can't trust that homegirl around your man. That's why you can't trust your man around your girl, your homeboy around your girl. Because of what they were rooted in. Your mother, the apology you are not giving to your father figure, your mother figure, or what the traumatic experience and going through the healing process, that's what that relationship represents. They represent your mother. They represent your father. Look at how you react to them. They ain't even got to do nothing to you, but you're going to react to them because you still acting out. You're still existing through the necessity of the projection of that wound that was bestowed upon you behind the first man that ever did something in your life. So now you're wondering why, even in the space of that person can absorb it. Why do you think they can absorb it? Why do you think they don't? Because you're ignoring an aspect with the side of yourself. All this shit come back to you. Remember, I'm not giving you I'm not going to say anything to you that does not lead you back to you, period. If it don't lead you back to you, to a point of you assessing yourself and really looking at yourself, then it's not knowledge. It's a facade that you're applying to their identity. It's time to put in this work. Got more after the plug talk and after this last message. Once again, welcome to the Plug Talk. Everything that's going on in the world of the Gotical Alchemist. I want to make a few announcements before we get into the usual hustle and bustle. If you have a product or a service, if you want to build or you want to build on a podcast, hit me up at SET Carlos CARLO Negus NEGUS at gmail.com, or you can hit the number 910-249-3999, and we can build and we can discuss and we're gonna get into that. That's what those are a couple of announcements. We expanded, we grown, we always building. Just like I said in the weekly reading, if you want to get plugged in for some more clarity, you ready? Whether you've been doing your shadow work and you reach a stopping point, or you don't know what shadow work is, or you don't know how to assess that space. Shadow work consultations, or you can get one of the more mini consultations with a reading that'll lead you to that consultation. The only thing stopping you is you. Only thing stopping you is you. So slide over in the inbox at Dolph Samdi Ra on my Facebook, or Papa_Lucy666 on IG, or you can hit that email or that number. We visited the website, it's coming soon. Cause I just want you to be fucking great. Speaking of becoming fucking great, y'all know every Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Gotical Alchemist is also the YouTube channel. We get into another topic, we get deeper into each topic. Last week's topic, we got into the end of the beginning, learning how to transmute through the distractions rather than trying to pick and choose which distractions we gonna look through. We get into the picking and choosing the distractions. And this week, we're getting into the dissolving of the dissolution. In business, in the business aspect, we use the dissolution. It's when we formally close down the old assets to the state. We separate from the state. Remember, you are a state, you are an entity that's within a state of being, going through an experience. You can't keep looking for you can't keep trying to annul or put an annulment to it happen. You can't keep trying to divorce from taking any fault and keep putting on the identity and all the reflections outside of you. It's time to assess that soul contract. It's time to assess how that distraction came there in the first place. So 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Friday night lectures, I'll see you in class. Once again, I appreciate all the support. Whether you're becoming a monthly patron, whether you want to get some ad space, get on the plug talk, want to build, all in one place. Tune in and tap out. Yeah. But stay tuned for the closeout. As we come to the end of another episode of the God Hour podcast, the spirit came within, we got real deep. I want you to understand this. You have to admit to yourself how you benefited from the event. How you benefited from, you did some emotional manipulating. You've done emotional manipulation. You've done it. We've done it. It's like a lot of times we want to go to, but they manipulated me and they did this. You did the same. You were a part of that space. You got to understand that what's in your space is created based on your emotional imprint. It's time to make an impact. I talked about that. We went way back earlier in the season. talking about that impact. You have to do this. You got a choice. You can do the work, you won't do the work. But you got to let go of the control or let go of the result. Let go of let go of this predestination of this result. And I guarantee you, when you start applying and allowing yourself to go through these processes and admitting to yourself, I read a post the other day talking about the aspects of the mental health issues in the Black community, heavy quotes. You gotta accept that you got that crack in your armor. You gotta accept that you got that crack in your womb. That the mental scape that is your womb. Because as long as you out here trying to create, as long as you're out here trying to do anything, it's always going to feed through that crack or through that wound. I don't care what, I remember looking at myself. I don't care what I did. Now that I look back at everything that I created and was in a state of creating and destroying and in a state of burning bridges and always saying fuck all this shit. But in the reality for it with myself, it was like I had to get to the point where I was like, the only reason that I'm doing this is to remain behaving under the old mental condition. The only thing worse than saying that I was in a mental condition and saying that I was struggling was maintaining my own struggle. I was my own obstacle. Your own obstacle. So I want to ask you this as you go throughout your week. When you wake up, when you become more self-aware, are you stuck in the awareness of the obstacles, or are you becoming self-aware of the opportunities? Remember, there's levels. The level at that bottom space is the care of people. The second level is the caring of the events. But that level of self-awareness, that honesty with yourself, that's going to be based in creating the solutions. In order to create solutions, I got to use discernment and acceptance of the problem and how I am a part of it. It's only a reflection of me. If it triggers you, it's time to go through that experience. It's time to apply so you can observe the lessons and observe the path. Fuck the result. Just look at the path. Everything that you desire is outside of your comfort zone. Remember, your projections, your perception, and your preservation, that's all inside your comfort zone. But your perspective, your potential, and your purpose, it's outside of the realm of your comfort. It's in your darkness. You got one or two choices. You can either continue moving in the sense of, why does it keep happening to me and why I keep getting the same repeats? Or you can start looking at, you know what? I need to stop looking at what it does and what it did and what it done and start looking at it for what it is. That's the key to your greatness. It's been another episode of the God Hour podcast. I want you to be fucking great once again. I haven't said it in a minute. I'm going to say it. A few of us will get to the door. A few of us walk through that door. But only the chosen know what to build in that darkness. I'll holler at y'all next week. I love you. I love us. Let's be fucking great. Ashe.